I left my book over here. We're in our 6th week of our series on the Eye of the Storm, based on this book by the same name, Eye of the Storm, Embracing Conflict and Creating Peace. Not that we need any of that in our life. Oh, it slipped down. I was playing around with it earlier. Okay, how's that? Better? Okay. You hear anything I said? Anyway, I'm sure I'll be repeating myself. So what we've been doing over these weeks is sort of finding our way through what in life is the challenges of the human condition. And probably the biggest challenge of the human condition, I would say, for many of us is relationships. Any agreement on that? Relationships. In fact, one of my colleagues, who was a very good minister, and she used to say, I just love ministry. It's the people that I don't like. And she was being facetious, but we know what she meant was that, you know, you can have a great relationship with God. You can have a great internal experience of the presence of God. And when it's just you and the oneness, all is well, and there's peace in your experience. And then when we have to interact with others, it often feels like it becomes challenging, right? Because we have trigger points, and so do other people. So what we're seeking to do when we're looking at a book like this is to sort of bring our spirituality down from the mountain into the life in which we have to, deal with each other face to face and heart to heart, and to deal with the practicality of work and relationships and the outrageous winds of good fortune and misfortune that visits every life. And so to be able to do that in the context of spirituality, in which we don't have to step off of the altar of our truth in order to be in a relationship with other people, it becomes the challenge and becomes the invitation for us to embody our spirituality, not just profess it in idealistic ways. Anyone up for that? And has anyone been challenged by that? And that's why we keep coming back. So this is week 6, and I think without over dramatizing this, I would say that the topic of today, which is non-resistance, perhaps is the most important realization that we can have in terms of how we can shift our experience from feeling the suffering that many of us feel in life back to that peace that passes human understanding that Jesus talked about. Because it is, and you may not take this on faith, and this may feel like a real stretch to you unless you've really explored this internally, but I would say that the cause of our suffering, if there's one singular cause, it's resistance. It's not the circumstances of our life, which of course is so easy to blame. It's so easy for us to attribute, I'm unhappy because what this happened, or what this person said, or what this situation with my work. It's easy to move the cause of our discomfort outside of ourselves and attribute it to people, situations, and circumstances. And that's very human, and we're not here to denigrate, the human condition or the natural human response. But it's for us to up-level our understanding so that we can begin to really locate the source of our discomfort where we actually can make a shift. Because how successful are we in changing life and changing people, circumstances? We have the illusion of what? Control, thank you. We have the illusion of control. And we think that if we could just sort of re-landscape our life and do some psychic surgery on the people in our life, that life would be good, yes? And we know time after time after time that is a deepening of our frustration, yes? But what is a diminishing of our frustration is when we can take ownership for our own experience for the discomfort that we feel within ourselves, and to realize that that discomfort is coming from the fact that we are identified as these vulnerable people, right? We call it in unity, we call it, or just in spirituality in general, we talk about the ego or the sense of a separate self. And yet we stand, solidly with the truth that there's only one presence and one power and one life and one love, God the good, omnipotent, and we say that that is our reality. And yet somehow we find it necessary for us to identify with this false sense of self. We have taken this beautiful reality, which is love itself, which is infinite possibilities, and we have overlooked that reality, and we have put on it an identity that is a separate person, and that separate person is separated, not in truth, but in the experience of separated from the love and the life that is our deeper reality. And so we feel vulnerable, yes? We feel vulnerable in relationship to life. We feel like we constantly have to protect ourselves and defend ourselves and modify the circumstances because we don't feel like we are solid. We don't feel like we are these spiritual beings who are invulnerable to the travails of life. Yes? So we've done that, but it's not an irreversible journey. We can go back to our original nature. We can return to the truth of who and what we really are. And that's what the spiritual journey is about. It isn't about becoming so skillful in being able to, control life and circumstances, and even to manifest circumstances in our life in order to avoid this journey. It's really to make this journey primary. And I know that many of you who've been on this path a while know that it's the only way that in order for us to realize the peace that passes human understanding, that we have to begin to sort of call off this visceral response to push life away and open our hearts and be able to be present with life, be present with circumstances. And we've heard this from many teachers, yes? More recently, perhaps Eckhart Tolle is the example of someone who many people have followed his very simple teaching, which is basically, it's about presence. It's about the presence, and even in non-spiritual terms, is about just being present to life circumstances. Because when we're present to life circumstances, then we are bringing our whole self to what is occurring in our life. And when we don't do that, then life has to be a certain way for us to be okay. So just by review, I'm going to read our introductory statement again because this is powerful and it's true. No one is against you. This is the absolute truth. You may not believe it now. You may have a lifetime of evidence to the contrary. And we do, yes. But until you realize that the entire universe is for you, you may never experience your wholeness and true worth. Purpose is to awaken you to the truth that there is only one presence and power at work in your life, and that this presence and power lives in you as the Spirit of God. For this reason, no one or nothing can be against you. To realize this is to claim your divine inheritance as a beloved creation of God. Amen? Amen. And then we said that the four winds or conditions that support conflict in our life, we've talked about three of them already, and today we'll just allude to the fourth one, but separation, misperception, competition, and defensiveness. Separation, misperception, competition. These are all the things, these are the conditions that create conflict in our life. And the fourth attribute of wholeness, which is really who and what we truly are, the fourth attribute is non-resistance. And non-resistance is the eye of the storm of defensiveness, that part of us that wants to push life away, that innate human tendency to protect ourselves and to push life away. It's appropriate at certain levels of the human condition, but when we take that as an overall response to life, then we're constantly pushing life away. What we're doing is, even though that situation that we don't like is already here, there's a part of us that sort of denies it, right? Like, this shouldn't be happening. Anyone? Yeah, we know this one, right? Like, this doesn't belong here. But the truth is that if it's here, right? It's too late to make a decision about whether it should be here, because it is here. And I know that sounds like some sort of mind game to play with that, but don't we end up oftentimes arguing with reality? And some would say that would be insane, to argue with reality, right? I remember Eckhart Tolle saying one time, referencing when you're driving down the street and there's a traffic jam, suddenly you have to stop and it's going to be a long wait. And you say, this shouldn't be happening. This traffic jam shouldn't be happening right now. And he said, so somehow we are become morally superior to reality. It's funny, but isn't it true that we somehow impose judgment on what is? And the alternative to that, in other words, the way of the peaceful warrior in the situation, is to say, it is what it is. This is happening. Now that doesn't eliminate that you might respond to that situation in a way that might bring some sort of human action to it. And I'm not talking about the traffic jam necessarily. But there may be situations in your life that are unhealthy, let's say, for example, for you. And you may still have the right to say yes or no to that situation in terms of how you're going to respond to it. But we're talking about the internal response to it. In other words, first we accept what is happening because it is what's happening, as opposed to somehow resisting and pushing it away, as if somehow that closed-hearted deflection or defense against what's going on is going to somehow save us or protect us or get us into a better place. But the truth is that the only thing that gets us into a better place, in other words, gets us back to an experience of peace and wholeness, is acceptance. Yes? Do we understand that? Now, we're not talking about acceptance of something that is, we might say is morally wrong or illegal or, offends the sensibilities, but we're talking about the reality of what has happened. Yes? And I think if you think in terms that the human being is, because the human is vulnerable, and we have taken on this attitude that we are averse to things that we don't want that are in our life, and we are seeking or yearning after things that we think we should have in our life. And both of those are forms of non-resistance. Can you see how that's true? If I'm looking for something that I want because I think that will complete me in some way, that's going to make me whole or happy or peaceful, and we are belying this ultimate truth, right? One presence, one power, one life, one love. That's the only really reality. And so if I'm seeking life to be different, then that's a form of resistance. And that resistance will only take me deeper into this sense of separation from the truth of who and what I am. And also, by the same token, if I am resisting life as it's showing up, I am in some way saying that I'm lacking something. Because I don't want this in my life because now I'm threatened. I'm threatened by these circumstances or this situation, which is also a violation of the truth that there can be anything that can be taken from me or that I can be diminished in any way, because life in spirit can't be against you. right? So we're taking this premise and we're just sort of unpacking it according to these different approaches and the ways that we show up as a human being, so that we can work our way back to the experience of our wholeness and our self-worth. Is anyone up for that? Great. So this is what we're doing, and it's to become gently aware. This is my approach anyway, to become gently aware of when we're doing this, not to make ourselves feel worse, not to beat ourselves up and see where we're screwing up and that we're lousy spiritual students. This is not the purpose of these sort of recognitions. The purpose of these recognitions is so that we can recognize the truth of our being, which is illumination, which is enlightenment, which is waking up. This is what we're here to do. And sometimes it'd be nice if we could just say there's only one presence and one power, and instantly have that realization, and that we would just be the light beings that we are. But somehow it feels like we have to work against, or not work against, but we have to acknowledge false in our life. First to see through the false in our life. As we see through the false in our life, what will remain will be what? Truth. This is really what it is. It's like, it's like, what's it like? I had an analogy earlier. Well, one that comes to me, and this is very mundane, but my father was a painting contractor at a time in his life, and during the summer I would work with him. And this was in Illinois, and it was hot and humid, and you would oftentimes had houses that were paint was peeling and falling off and all of that. And he was a very high-minded, quality person, and so he would go out and he would give someone an estimate, and they would say, well, you're higher than the other guy that came out. And he said, well, it's because when I do the work, I'm going to make sure that I take off everything from your house that is, peeling and not adhering to your house before I put on some new paint. And it's sort of like, you've got to get down to the essence of what you are. And the way you do that is you have to be mindful and be willing to look at those things where you have encrusted your life with falsehoods, where you have made up stories about what you need and how people need to be in order for you to be okay. That's like the rust or the peeling paint or whatever it is that accumulates on our consciousness, and that's all. That we know that is it's temporal. In other words, it never really lasts. As soon as you identify one thing that's wrong with your life and that thing gets resolved, another one will just pop up, right? Now this person's being, I've got this person fixed over here, they're treating me the way they're supposed to. But then this person over here now, a mole, you knock one down and another one pops up. So, we're really here to be gentle with ourselves, but not to retreat from the work that is really to remain conscious of what stands in the way and the tendencies we have to keep ourselves out of the kingdom of God, as Jesus would call it. I've got like 4 pages of notes here, so we'll be here till 2, if that's okay with you guys. No, I'm not going to put you through that. There's some metaphysical principles that are sort of helpful, and one of them is if we understand our true nature, and our true nature is spirit itself, but to understand how that operates vis-a-vis life circumstances, we see how it varies remarkably from the human reaction to life circumstances. And the analogy is, it's like the space in this room, okay? What did we have to do to the space in this room to make it possible for you all to come in? And I'm not talking about the chairs or anything, I'm just talking about the space in this room. Did we have to do anything? No. And did we have to do anything a long time ago? In other words, was there any kind of preparation to change the space in this room so that it would welcome and accept everyone and everything that goes on in here? Nothing. Well, that's the metaphor for that's tantamount to our consciousness, because what we are is pure spirit, and pure spirit is pure consciousness. And pure consciousness is like the space in this room. It allows whatever. And it doesn't have to become something or change its nature. In fact, its very nature is allowing itself. Isn't that right? In fact, you wouldn't even know what's going on. You wouldn't have the capacity to experience unless that you had consciousness, right? If you're not conscious, you're not aware. When you go to sleep at night and you go into deep sleep, you know that there was this vacuum of time, right, that you can't account for. And in deep sleep, right, we are just pure consciousness. But there's no mind activity going on, which is what we tend to track as the activity of our mind. And so the space in this room is like consciousness. And I think that's a wonderful way for us to realize, well, my nature, if I'm getting right down to it, if I'm letting go of this human nature that needs life to be a certain way, that I'm constantly in reaction to life, then there's this part of me that's not in reaction to life, that accepts life just as it is. In other words, because it is, all it is a space for life to show up and for you to have an experience of life. That's really what consciousness is. And what we're trying to do is to try to re-identify in some sense, or you could say disidentify from this false sense of self, and to fall back into that recognition of this open, spacious, aware presence, which is who and what we are. Another metaphor that I particularly like is, this is one that's in the book, and it has to do with electricity. You know, if you have a light bulb, you need to have power, yes, and you need to have a way that power can move, which is wiring, yes, and then you have a switch, and then you have the light. And when all those things are present and flowing and working, then we have illumination. Since you are a little light of mine, and you want to shine, we have to realize that how that is true in the metaphor of who and what we are. So in the case of being present to life, you must be conscious of your purpose. And what is our purpose? We said last week. This is 7 days ago. Who knows, right? Purpose is to be centered in God, essentially, to be connected with the truth. So that's our power source, yeah? Any argument with that? One presence, one power. And you must be connected to your experience. So we just talked about you could be resisting your experience, but this is about being connected, being present to your experience. And what's that? That's the wire. That's the wire. And then the switch is the willingness. Are you willing? Are you willing? Because if you're not willing, you know, we can become the obscuration, or we can become the obstacle to the flow of spirit in our life. Do we know this? Because we're so sure we know. That's the problem, right? We put that problem outside of ourselves, and we lack the willingness to see the truth. And we lack the willingness to let this heart open to experience the truth that can flow through us, the God presence to flow through us, which is what lights up the consciousness that we are, and becomes the way that we presence ourselves in every life experience. And that's what we want, yes. So it's about what is your purpose in this situation? You know, it's difficult, but what's your purpose? My purpose here is to be the presence and the power and the love of God. Okay. So what does that look like? Are you willing to see clearly? Are you willing to not argue with reality, for example? Instead of saying this shouldn't have happened, can you just say, it is what it is here in my life? You might even think it's here for a reason. I mean, you don't even have to go that far, but you could say that. You could say that maybe there's a spiritual reason for this. Maybe there's something. And there is a spiritual reason, right, for every moment. Because we're always here to translate the events and circumstances of our lives in a way that allows us to grow. Yes? So there's that. And then finally, there's a story that, it's one of my favorite stories from Dr. Naomi Remen, who was a physician. She wrote a little book called Kitchen Table Wisdom, which is one of my favorite little books of stories. Ministers are always looking for story books, we can give illustrations. And I've told this one many times, maybe you've heard it before, but it really speaks to what we're sharing today. And the story is this young man, he's a 24-year-old man who has bone cancer. And in order to stop the spread of the cancer, he needs to have one of his legs amputated. And so in the course of, after he has his leg amputated, he goes down into a very deep depression. We can understand it, deep sadness, and really doesn't even really want to live. He's so depressed and despondent over this, what's happened to him. And he begins working with Dr. Remen, and she introduces him to art therapy as one way of coping with his despondency. And she asks him, paint or draw what you feel. So take whatever you're feeling, if you can't express it in words, do a piece of art. So he draws this vase, and in the middle of the vase, he takes a black crayon and he puts a big crack in it. And he says, that's what I feel. I feel that I'm worthless, and like a vase would be worthless if it was cracked. And he feels like he's broken. Well, she continues to work with him, and she invites him, after he's had a period of certain grief that he's experiencing. She says, I want to invite you to see if you can get out of yourself a little bit and begin to go out to other people, because there's many people that are going through difficult times, and now you've kind of gone through the first stage of this, and maybe you can offer them some comfort. He doesn't really want to do it, but he sort of reluctantly does. So she takes him to the hospital where people have had major surgeries, and some have lost limbs, and some have had other parts of them taken. And so he walks into this one room where a girl who's had double mastectomy, young girl, and she's just so despondent, and similar to how he was experiencing in the beginning. And so he goes in, and he had an artificial leg on him, and so he kind of hobbles into the room, and he starts talking to her and tries to speak in terms of empathy, like I understand what you're going through. But she keeps her eyes closed, and she won't even look up. And he does this for a while, and finally there's a radio playing in the room. Rock music is on, and he gets this idea. And so he's wearing shorts, and his leg is obvious, and he takes off the artificial leg, and he starts dancing around the room on one leg. And she hears it, and she looks up, and she's startled, and she starts laughing, and she says, if you can dance, I guess I can sing. And this, after a period of time, he meets with Dr. Remen again, and they're going through all this artwork that he had done before, and she shows him the one of the vase, the crack through it, and he looks at it and goes, this is not finished yet. And she puzzled, and she gives it back to him with some crayons. And he takes a yellow crayon, and he puts these rays of yellow coming out of the crack. He says, before I felt that my amputation was where I was broken and where I was useless. Now I see it is where the light comes through. I think all of us probably have something in our life that feels, like a major crack. It's something that has separated us from peace and from love and from wholeness. We've all had experiences. And it's the human reaction, is initially is to not believe that this has happened. It's a sense of unbelievable. And then eventually maybe we come to the place of acceptance, but we're still despondent. And if we are willing, and if we remain connected to the truth of who and what we are, grace will give us purpose, a new purpose. And in lieu of remaining in the sense of feeling diminished and that life is against us, we may be shown a way that we can take this difficulty and bring more light into the world. And that is the highest possible outpicturing of difficulty in our life. When we take a difficult situation and we begin to find a way to express more of God's love in the world, this can change, a dark night to a new dawn. And I know that many of you probably have done this or will be faced with this opportunity in the future. And so I commend that to you as I have done with some of the circumstances in my life, and I won't take any more of your time. I've shared some of them with you before. But let's take a little time to go with you, deepen this understanding. You have that. So let's take a deep breath. Let it out with a sense of relief and trust. So just invite you as you breathe to allow your heart to expand. As you allow your heart to expand, just like the space in this room, it has no form. And it's spacious, and it's welcoming, it's open, it's accepting. Not by choosing to be so, but because its very nature is to be such. We're talking about your spiritual heart. We're talking about the essence of you, your true nature is allowing itself. This is where we let go of the story of how life isn't conducive to peace and happiness. And we reaffirm our faith and our recognition of what is already open, spacious, and trusting. Jesus said there will be trials, tribulations in this world. Be of good cheer. You're not seen by appearances, but by seeing with the eyes of truth, fullness, spaciousness, and peace, which welcomes and allows all. Problems do not come with circumstances. Circumstances are in control. Our perception and our interpretation makes problems. What if we show us the way to respond to a difficult circumstance, that we might be instruments of the one presence and one power, as an affirmative response to the challenge, where we might see that what appears to be a crack in the darkness is an opening to the light of truth. And that our willingness to see in such a way switches from darkness to possibility, to a new vision, in which the difficulty becomes clay to be molded for a greater good. This is God's will and God's way, according to our willingness to be who we were created to be, to add nothing to God's creation that would impede the flow of light, to dedicate ourselves to be light workers in a world that needs light. So we thank you, Spirit, that your endless flow of love and light makes possible this vision of heaven on earth. We offer our willingness, our trust, and our faith. We can be part of your will and your way on this planet. Forever. And ever. Amen.